I was supposed to be somewhere outside of Knoxville on a Tuesday night, parked at a truck stop with a cold coffee and nothing but static on the AM dial. That was the plan. 14 days out, 2 days back, same as it had been for the last 4 years. My dispatcher knew it. My ex-wife knew it. And apparently, so did the man she had moved into my daughter's home. But plans change. The load I was hauling furniture going to a distribution center in Chattanooga got rejected at the dock. Damaged corner on a bookshelf unit, something minor that shouldn't have mattered, but the receiving manager that morning was in a mood, and he sent the whole pallet back. By noon, I had an empty trailer and a dispatcher telling me to deadhead back to the yard in Atlanta. I didn't argue. I was already thinking about Emma. I always thought about Emma on the road. She was 9 years old, small for her age, with her mother's dark hair and my terrible habit of biting her thumbnail when she was nervous. We talked every night I was away, or we used to. Over the past few months, the calls had gotten shorter. She sounded quieter. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say yes in that particular way children say yes when they mean something else entirely, and I would lie awake in my cab trying to convince myself I was imagining things. My ex-wife Rachel and I had been divorced for 3 years. It wasn't ugly, the divorce, or it wasn't as ugly as it could have been. We'd grown apart the way people do when one of them is gone 11 months out of the year and the other one stops waiting by the window. I didn't blame her for that. I blamed myself plenty. The custody arrangement gave Emma to Rachel during the week and me on weekends, plus extended time in summer, which sounds fair on paper but feels like having your heart handed back to you every Sunday evening in a grocery store parking lot. Craig Bowen had come into the picture about 18 months before any of this happened. Rachel met him through a mutual friend, some backyard cookout in Marietta. He was in residential construction, mid-40s, divorced himself, no kids of his own. Rachel called me to let me know she was seeing someone, which I appreciated. She said Emma liked him. I had no reason not to take her at her word. The first time I met Craig was at Emma's school play in February. He stood next to Rachel in the gymnasium with his arms crossed and smiled at me with all his teeth showing and shook my hand a little too firmly. I told myself I was being paranoid. Men who've been gone as long as I had don't get to have opinions about who sits beside their ex-wife at school plays. But I noticed things. Small things that I filed away and tried not to look at directly. Emma stopped mentioning him by name. She used to say Craig this and Craig that the way kids do when a new adult has their attention. Then one day she just stopped. When I asked about him, she gave me short answers. He was fine. Everything was fine. The thumbnail went into her mouth. I asked Rachel about it once, carefully. She told me Emma was just going through an adjustment period, and that Craig was actually very good with her, very patient. I believed her because I wanted to, because the alternative meant something I wasn't ready to sit with. So there I was on a Tuesday afternoon in October. Empty trailer. Early release. Pulling off I-75 into Atlanta with 4 hours of daylight left. I called Rachel to say I was back early and that I'd like to pick Emma up for the night if she wasn't busy. The call went to voicemail. I tried twice more. Nothing. I told myself that was normal. Rachel worked afternoons at a dental office in Smyrna and kept her phone in her locker during shifts. Emma would be home from school by 3:30. Craig worked construction, usually done by 5. I sat in the truck stop on the south side of Atlanta and ate a sandwich and watched the clock and called one more time. Voicemail again. It was 4:15. I don't know what made me decide to drive over. I didn't have a reason that I could have explained to anyone. Something in the back of my chest had been tightening for weeks. The way the sky tightens before a storm you can't see yet. And that afternoon it got tight enough that I put the truck in gear and drove the 22 minutes to the house on Birchwood Lane without calling ahead again. The neighborhood was quiet the way suburbs are quiet on weekday afternoons. Leaf blowers somewhere down the street. A sprinkler ticking. I parked at the curb because Craig's pickup was in the driveway and I didn't want to block him in. I remember thinking about not inconveniencing him, and I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Nothing. I knocked. Nothing. I stood there for a moment and listened. The sprinkler kept ticking. Then I heard something else, faint, from somewhere behind the house. A sound like a voice, small and hoarse, like someone who had been calling out for a long time. I went around the side of the house. There was a wooden gate, and it was latched but not locked, and I opened it and walked into the backyard and stopped. The yard was a normal yard. There was a rusted swing set Emma had outgrown, a garden bed Rachel never got around to finishing, a gas grill on the patio, and at the far end of the yard, against the back fence, there was a storm cellar, one of those old in-ground ones with the slanted metal doors that lie flat against the earth, the kind that's been there since before the house was built, left over from some other era. There was a padlock on the handles, and from underneath those metal doors, I could hear my daughter calling my name, not screaming, not crying, just saying, quietly and hoarsely, as if she had run out of the energy for anything louder, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." I don't remember crossing the yard. I remember being at the doors. I remember pulling at the padlock, pulling hard enough that my hands shook, and then I remember running back to the driveway and grabbing the tire iron from behind the seat of my truck, and running back and hitting that padlock until it came apart. 6, 7, 8 times. My arms didn't feel like my arms. The doors swung open. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete and something stale and close. The cellar was about 8 feet deep, maybe 10 feet long. It had a bare concrete floor and the old wooden shelves along the walls that these things always have, mostly empty. A single pull-chain bulb on the ceiling that wasn't on. In the thin wedge of afternoon light falling through the open doors, I saw my daughter sitting on the bottom step, with her knees pulled to her chest and her face tilted up toward the light. She was blinking. Her eyes were having trouble with the brightness. I was down those stairs before I knew I had moved. She didn't cry when I picked her up. She just pressed her face into my neck and held on to me with both arms, and her whole body was shaking in small, continuous tremors, like a dog that's been left outside in January. She was cold. The cellar was cold. She was in the same clothes she'd left for school, in a pink sweatshirt, jeans, sneakers, and she smelled like concrete and old air. I carried her up into the light and sat down on the grass with her in my lap. "Baby," I said. "Emma, I'm here. I've got you." She kept her face in my neck for a long time. When she finally looked up at me, her lips were cracked at the corners and her eyes were red-rimmed, and she said, in a voice like dry leaves, "I was so thirsty, Daddy." I asked her how long. She thought about it. Children are bad with time in ways that break your heart when you think about what it means. She said she thought she'd been at school. She said it was morning when she went in, and she didn't know how many times she'd slept. She thought maybe twice, maybe 3 times. I looked at my phone. It was Tuesday. Emma went to school Monday through Friday. "Was it yesterday that you went in?" I asked. "Or before yesterday?" She thought again. "Before," she said. "I think before." I held her and looked at that open cellar and did the arithmetic, and something happened behind my eyes that I can't fully describe. It wasn't anger, exactly. Anger is too hot. This was colder. This was the kind of thing that settles into your hands and makes them very steady. I asked her what had happened. She told me in pieces, the way children tell hard things, stopping and starting, circling back, leaving gaps where the worst parts were. She had come home from school on Sunday. Craig was there. Rachel was still at work. She had been playing in her room, and something had fallen off her bookshelf, a glass snow globe that her grandmother had given her, and it had broken on the hardwood. She had tried to clean it up herself with paper towels, and she hadn't gotten all the glass, and Craig had stepped on a piece in his sock feet, and he had been very, very angry. She said, "He said I was careless and stupid, and that I needed to learn to sit and think about what I'd done." She said he had taken her outside and put her in the cellar and locked it. She said, "I could hear Mommy come home. I called and called. I don't know if she heard me." I asked her if Craig had given her any water. She shook her head. I asked her if he had come back at all. She nodded. "This morning, he opened the door and told me if I told anyone he would do it again for longer." I sat with that sentence for a moment. Then I took my phone out and called 911. While I was on the phone, Emma fell asleep against my chest with the abrupt and total unconsciousness of extreme exhaustion, the way very young children sleep, with no transition. Her breathing was shallow and fast, and her lips were still cracked, and she smelled like that cellar, and I held her and spoke to the dispatcher in a low and level voice and told her exactly what I had found and exactly where I was. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. I counted. The police arrived in 11. The paramedic who took Emma from my arms was a woman named Denise, who talked to Emma in a low, steady voice, even though Emma was barely conscious, explaining every single thing she was doing before she did it. I have thought about Denise many times since that day. She was the first person who showed Emma the kind of careful gentleness she had not been shown in that house for a long time. Emma was dehydrated, significantly. She'd been in that cellar since Sunday afternoon. It was Tuesday at 4:47 in the evening. That was approximately 55 hours. The ER doctor, a tired-looking man named Patterson who had clearly seen a great deal of the worst of people and had learned to keep his face very still because of it, examined her thoroughly and then came and sat with me in the waiting room and kept his voice quiet. He told me Emma's core temperature was slightly below normal. He told me she had bruising on her upper arms consistent with being gripped and handled roughly, bruising that was not from the cellar, bruising that was several weeks old. He told me this was not the first time her body had experienced something it shouldn't have. "Has she said anything to you about other incidents?" he asked me. I thought about the thumbnail, the short phone calls, the way she stopped saying Craig's name. "She will," I said. Rachel arrived at the hospital at 6:15, still in her scrubs from the dental office, and the look on her face when she saw me in that waiting room was not the look of a woman who didn't know something was wrong. It was the look of a woman who had known something was wrong and had made a series of choices about what to do with that knowledge. I want to be fair to Rachel, even now. I have tried to understand what happens to a person who loves someone and then begins to see something terrible in them and has to decide every single day whether to believe their eyes. I think fear is a part of it. I think shame is a part of it. I think there is a particular cruelty in how abusers arrange things so that the people around them become complicit before they realize what they've agreed to. But Emma was in that cellar for 55 hours. And Rachel had been home. And I cannot be fair to anyone about that. She tried to talk to me in the hallway, and I told her very quietly that she should not talk to me right now, and that she should talk to the police officers who were waiting to speak with her. She looked at me the way people look when the version of themselves they've been maintaining finally becomes impossible to maintain, and she went to speak to the officers. Craig Bowen was arrested at the house on Birchwood Lane at 7:48 that evening. I know this because one of the officers came to tell me personally, which was a kindness I didn't ask for and was grateful for anyway. Apparently Craig had been home the entire time. He hadn't run. Maybe he thought there was a version of this where it worked out for him. Men like that tend to believe there's always a version where it works out for them. Emma stayed in the hospital for 2 days. I slept in the chair beside her bed for both of them. On the second morning, she woke up and asked me for orange juice, and then asked me if Craig was going to come back. And I told her no, very clearly and simply, the way children need to hear true things not as reassurance but as fact. No, he is not coming back. You are safe. She drank her orange juice and looked at the wall for a moment, and then she asked me if we could get a dog. I told her yes, absolutely yes. The case moved through the Georgia court system over the following 8 months. Craig Bowen was charged with cruelty to children in the first degree, a felony under Georgia Code 16570, as well as false imprisonment. The prosecutor, a woman from the Cobb County DA's office who wore the same gray blazer to every hearing and took absolutely no nonsense from anyone in that courtroom, built the case methodically and without drama. She didn't need drama. The facts were dramatic enough. The bruising documentation from Dr. Patterson, the photographs of the cellar, the chain and padlock, Emma's testimony, delivered via a recorded interview with a forensic specialist in a child-friendly room with soft chairs and a box of crayons on the table, because Emma should not have had to sit in a courtroom and say these things in front of the man who did them, and in Georgia, thank God, she didn't have to. Craig's attorney argued that the cellar incident was a disciplinary measure that had gone further than intended, that Craig had been under stress, that Emma had not been in any real physical danger. The jury took 4 hours to disagree. 4 hours. I have been told that is fast. Craig Bowen was convicted on both counts and sentenced to 12 years, with the possibility of parole after 8. Rachel pled guilty to a charge of contributing to the deprivation of a minor. She received 5 years of probation, mandatory counseling, and the complete termination of her parental rights. That last part was not the prosecutor's decision or the judge's decision, primarily. It came from a family court proceeding that ran parallel to the criminal case, and it came after Emma's court-appointed guardian ad litem submitted a report that I have read only once because once was enough. I was granted full custody. Emma sees a therapist every Thursday afternoon. Her name is Margaret, and she has a therapy dog named Biscuit who sleeps under her desk during sessions, and Emma adores both of them. The progress has not been linear. There are weeks when Emma is bright and loud and chases our dog, a yellow lab we named Captain, around the backyard until they're both exhausted, and there are other weeks when she is quiet in a way I recognize, the old way, the thumbnail in the mouth way, and we sit together on the couch, and I don't push her to be anything other than what she is that day. Margaret tells me that is exactly right. I am choosing to believe her. There is something I haven't said yet, and I want to say it plainly because it's part of the story, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. When Craig was taken from the house on Birchwood Lane that evening, the arresting officer told me later that they had found him in the kitchen. He had been sitting at the kitchen table. The door to the storm cellar was still standing open in the backyard, the broken padlock still in the grass where I'd left it, and the officer said Craig had been sitting at the table with a glass of water in front of him, and had not said anything when they came in. I have thought about what that means, what it means that a man could sit at a table with a glass of water while a 9-year-old girl who had been underground for over 2 days was being taken to the hospital, and I have not been able to arrive at anything that resembles an explanation. There are people in the world who do not have a thing inside them that functions the way a conscience functions, and they live among the rest of us and are mostly invisible until they aren't, and all you can do, all I could do, is make sure that what they did gets seen. Emma asked me once, about 6 months after Craig was convicted, whether it was okay that she didn't miss her mother. She asked it very carefully, the way she asks things she has been carrying for a while, like she needed my permission to feel it. I told her that her feelings were hers, all of them, and that none of them required my permission or anyone else's. She nodded. She looked relieved in the way that children look relieved when an adult finally agrees to let them put something heavy down. I won't tell you that everything is fixed. Nothing is fixed in the way it was before. Emma is not the same child she was, and I am not the same man. The truck driving is over. I took a local dispatch job that keeps me home every night, and I took a pay cut to do it, and I would take a larger one if I had to. Every evening at 5:30 I am in that house on Birchwood Lane. We moved. We are not in that house anymore. I want to be clear about that. I am in our house, and Emma is home from school, and Captain is losing his mind at the front door, and whatever version of okay we are building looks something like that. I went back, once, to look at the storm cellar. The new owners had filled it in. There's a rose bed there now, red roses in October, which struck me as the kind of thing that happens in the world sometimes, beauty growing in exactly the wrong place and being beautiful anyway. I stood at the fence for a long time and thought about Emma on those stairs, with her eyes turned up toward a light she couldn't quite reach, calling out in a voice that had almost given up, and I thought about how close I came to not being there, how one rejected load, one returned pallet, one unreasonable dock manager changed the whole shape of what happened. I am not a religious man in any organized sense, but I believe in something on certain evenings, and it has something to do with empty trailers and early exits and a child's voice carrying just far enough. On the drive home, I called Emma. She answered on the second ring. I could hear Captain barking in the background and the television and the specific loud, living noise of a child in a safe house on a Thursday afternoon. "Hey, Daddy," she said. "Hey, baby, how was school?" "Okay." "We did fractions. I hate fractions." "Fractions are terrible," I said. "I'll be home in 20 minutes. Can we have pizza?" "We can absolutely have pizza." She hung up without saying goodbye, the way she does, the way she's always done, because she has never been the kind of child who needs a formal ending to things. She just goes back to the moment she's in. I have spent the last 4 years trying to learn how to do that. I pulled into the driveway at 5:42. Captain hit the front window before I got the truck in park. I could see Emma's silhouette behind him, one hand on the dog's back, watching me come up the walk, and when I opened the door, she didn't say anything, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around my waist, and pressed her face into my jacket for a moment, the way she does sometimes, without explanation, just needing to confirm something. Then she stepped back and looked up at me and said, "You promised pizza." "I promised pizza," I agreed. She turned and went back inside, and Captain followed her, and I stood in the doorway for 1 extra second before I went in, just to feel the weight of it, the specific weight of coming home to a door that opens, to a child who can hear your car in the driveway and knows the sound of it, to a life that is ordinary in every way that matters. I never take it for granted, not for one single day. I never will.